I'm joined now by Rachel Maddow, host of The Rachel Maddow Show, and Lawrence O'Donnell, host of The Last Word. All right, let me get first sort of top-line reactions from you, Rachel, to the court's decision today.
Well, first of all, just kudos on fakakta nonsense at the end of the A block was just, I aspire to end up there at the end of a monologue, an explanatory one like this. I think, Chris, that the thing that was interesting to me about this ruling was that from the very beginning, you're right that there is complicated jurisdictional stuff. There's stuff that lawyers will get that other people won't get in here. But from the very beginning, it was very blunt on stuff that there's been an effort to be fuzzy about by people in the political arena. It says at the very outset of the ruling, there was not a peaceful transition of power. The reason the Congress was attacked, that resulted from Trump's rally, from which thousands of people then marched to the Capitol and attacked Congress. It's very blunt about those things. It calls it an unprecedented assault on our system of government. It's just very blunt about these things that there have been efforts to obfuscate, and I thought that was helpful. But I also just thought it was helpful, I think, for us as a country in talking about this, that they did outright mock the claims that you have to be impeached and convicted in the Senate before you could be put on trial for committing murder or committing any of these other crimes. And I think that it's good that they basically rebutted what I think of as the common sense claim here, which is that other presidents like Richard Nixon, like even Bill Clinton, like other presidents in their real lives have shown, even Trump in his presidency has shown and has articulated that they knew they could be put on trial after they were out of office. They've all known it. It's a common sense thing that many presidents have conceded, including Trump himself while he was being impeached. And those things, I think, they just operate in the public sphere as well as they operate in the law. And we really need that. We need that from the judiciary right now so people really understand what's going on here.
Yeah, there's two places in particular they make those citations. So the Nixon-Ford example, which I think is the most famous to all of us, it was the biggest story in the country at the time that Ford was prospectively pardoning Richard Nixon, and literally everyone in the country understood that the reason he was doing that and the reason Nixon was accepting it is because he was probably going to be indicted and face criminal prosecution. But there's also Bill Clinton cutting a deal on his way out the door of the White House to basically have his law license suspended in exchange, basically, for not being prosecuted. Another point at which, clearly he thought it was possible. And then, Rachel, to your point, they also cite Trump's own lawyers at his impeachment trial, which I thought was interesting, whether that was going to make it into the opinion, saying, doesn't say you can't go indict the guy. I mean, literally, his other lawyers, different lawyers, say that. So, yeah, all three of those examples, which I think are sort of common sense historical examples rather than like arcane legal ones, are, in the opinion, very persuasive. Lawrence, what do you think?
Yeah, so we're talking about President Bill Clinton, Yale Law School graduate. President Richard Nixon, Duke Law School graduate. Okay, they firmly believe that the president can absolutely be charged with crimes, certainly after leaving office. And so this is one of those opinions that says to America, it says to every high school history student in America, you're not crazy. It's what you thought.
Yes,
it's what we've always thought for the entire history of the Republic. This is the way it is. And if we think back to the beginning of this case, there wasn't a single legal pundit, there wasn't anybody in the right wing anywhere saying, oh, well, you can't indict him. He's completely immune. This notion had never even been advanced by anyone until Trump's lawyers decided to advance it in this case. And so, I mean, it kind of took everyone by surprise in how outrageous it was. And what you have here now is the proof that there is a very big difference between what we call a novel case, which is this interesting issue that has never floated up all the way to the Supreme Court.
Which is Thursday, I think it's fair to say. Yes.
And a crazy case, which has absolutely no conceivable basis.
Yeah, and in some ways I almost felt like it's sort of a strange thing to read the opinion because it's incredibly persuasive, Rachel, and very thorough and goes through a bunch of stuff. But at some level it was like, the essential point was so ludicrous that it almost made me mad that this is the way the system works, and it's important that the system work its way through. But there was almost some sense, and it was like, right, of course, as they went through every example, as they cited chapter and verse, as they, limbed the lines of executive authority jurisprudence from Marbury to Youngstown and on and on and on, it was like, yes, this is precisely what it looks like, to Lawrence's point.
Yes, and it's what we've all known was true all along, and you're trying to say that this is, that we shouldn't believe our lying eyes and the presidency has always been something different. Here's all the ways in which that's not true. That's absolutely right. I will say that the other piece of this that I was just pleased to read is that there is an element of the defense that Trump has mounted, both in public relations, both as a public relations matter, but also as a legal matter to some extent. And I think of it as the mirrored sunglasses problem. Like, do we really want to be a country in which some lieutenant colonel in mirrored sunglasses has every incentive to hold on to power for his entire natural life? Because the expectation is that once you're no longer holding the reins of power, you're going to be prosecuted by your political enemies and by your political successors. I mean, it sucks to be a country where former presidents get prosecuted, because that's a lousy thing about countries in which that's a regular dynamic, in which those prosecutions are politically motivated and they're junk prosecutions, but they're used for political purposes. Trump has made that case both in the courtroom and outside the courtroom, and I've always felt like it's his strongest point. Obviously, the solution to that as a country is don't elect fricking criminals to be presidents. But you also got the judges today in the D.C. Circuit arguing against it and saying, listen, we have ways in our system of dealing with meritless and harassing prosecution. We have systems within our judiciary that prevent that. And so the idea that once you're prosecuted for crimes, you're going to then prosecute and everybody's going to prosecute people for nothing from here on out. No, the judiciary is here to make sure that doesn't happen, and we know that it won't. And seeing that asserted by this panel of judges, to me, actually made me feel better about that problem for the first time since this whole merry-go-round started spinning around.
Yeah, and Donald, Lawrence, I want to just read this Truth Social post. Do we have that from the last block? Maybe that just got taken away from me. Basically, Trump has been saying time and time again that if there's no immunity, then every president, to Rachel's point in the previous block, then every president will face prosecution afterwards. And that always reads to me as an obvious threat. I mean, it seems to me he's saying not just, can we show that Truth Social post? Blah, 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 that must have full immunity in order to, a president will be afraid to act. I know from personal experience, even our elections will be corrupted and under siege, so bad, so dangerous for a nation, save presidential immunity. Basically, he's saying, like, I'm going to prosecute Joe Biden if I'm elected. That's the way those always read to me.
Yeah, I wasn't reading it as that future thing. I was just reading it as the kind of dumb Trump idea about the way the world works. But you're absolutely right. He's saying this absolutely allows me to do it. I'll do it. What's so striking about it is that, as the court points out in the opinion, one thing that matters when you say, if this happens, then this will happen. I mean, what meteorology is interested in is, hey, if it comes up this way, if the track is this way, this will happen. How do we know that? Oh, because we've been studying it for 100 years. We have a couple of 100 years of this not happening. Yes. A couple of 100 years. And the court was very impressed. The court says we're really impressed with a couple of 100 years of this absolutely not happening when the presidents believed that it could. I mean, you can go into these presidencies and discover that, yes, Franklin Roosevelt was worried that this idea might be against the law. Yes. Therefore, he won't do it. Harry Truman was worried that seizing the steel mills could be against the law, but he did it, and he found out it was against the law, and he couldn't do it. They've always been worried about, is this against the law, and can I do it?
There's also this really interesting section, Rachel, where it's not just the history of the presidency, but they also do this analogizing to other positions. And there's a few different examples, right? Juries, right? Like jurors, we need them to make tough calls and use their discretion. But like, there's stuff that they could do that would be criminal in their official duty. Like if someone paid them to vote a certain way, that would be criminal. Judges, judges have to make a ton of tough calls. You know that justices we're writing for, but also judges can be prosecuted, and it all seems to work out. Like, members of Congress have to make tough discretionary calls about what's legal, what's not, like, also can be prosecuted. They sort of go through all these other examples, like, yeah, there's all these people that have to do difficult stuff, make tough calls about what the law is, and none of them are rendered immune.
Right. And they go back to cases from the 30s. They go through all of those different examples. They go through all these different presidential examples that we just talked about, including, again, most famously, why did Ford need to pardon Nixon? It says in the proclamation, as a result of certain acts or omissions occurring before his resignation from the office of president, Richard Nixon has become liable to possible indictment and trial for offenses against the United States. Right? Like, it wasn't something we had to read into their state of mind. Like, it's explicit in the proclamation. Everybody knows that after a president leaves office, he or she can be indicted, and that has always been baked in to what presidents have done. So this idea that it'll be a new thing and it will make all presidents afraid and timid, they both disprove it in the law, and they disprove it historically, and they disprove it in a way that just makes sense to the average American who isn't a lawyer, who's trying to understand what's happening with this very radical thing going on in Republican Party politics, trying to put this guy on the ballot again.
Yeah, and to that point about public audience, judicial audience, right? Because there are two throughout all this, and they're very frank about sort of different sort of interest at play, right? Presidential interest to act with some latitude in a difficult job, the public interest in making sure that people don't try to overturn elections and foment violent coups on the Capitol, which they talk about. Now we've got this question about the public interest of this thing getting to trial. So here's the timing. They say the clerk, meaning the court clerk, is directed to withhold issuance of the mandate. That's basically the sort of possession of the case back to Judge Tanya Chutkan through February 12th, 2024. And then within that period, the appellant notifies the clerk in writing he's filed an application to the Supreme Court. The clerk is directed to withhold issuance of the mandate pending the Supreme Court's final disposition of the application, which means it now goes to the court, which has a monumental decision, both on the merits but also on the timing.
Yeah, the Supreme Court is faced with a strange one here. If this was any other litigant, they wouldn't take it. It's a preposterous claim. An appeals court is dealing effectively with a completely preposterous claim. And so the only reason to take it is, well, it's presidential, so maybe we should weigh in. But they have to know that they're going to have SEAL Team 6 in the hearing, in the Supreme Court. It's not going to be one question about SEAL Team 6. Right. There are going to be several judges who have an opportunity to question about Donald Trump's ability to have as many Supreme Court justices as he wants executed so that he can get the opinions he wants out of the Supreme Court, and he cannot be prosecuted for that if he also executes enough United States senators so that he cannot be found guilty in an impeachment trial.
Yeah,
and so there's a circus. The Supreme Court knows, oh, my God, there's a horrible, stupid circus coming our way. All we have to do is deny cert.
Well, and it contrasts a little bit with the position of the case, its posture, Rachel, going forward, right? Because the case they're going to hear on Thursday, they had to take, basically. I think we would all sort of all agree, right? Like, Colorado kicked the guy off the ballot. So did Maine. Other states aren't. There's got to be the highest court in the land is going to be the one that's ultimately going to give us a constitutional ruling on this. They had to get involved. In this one, to Lawrence's point, they simply don't.
Right. And the mechanics of how that happens, though, end up being important. You only need 4 Supreme Court justices to say, yes, we want to hear it, which means you need, you don't need a majority. You only need 4. It's easy to imagine them coming up with the 4, even if it is impossible to imagine them deciding on the merits in Trump's favor. And so do they want to take the case? They don't have to agree to have an incredibly radical, stupid ruling in order to do Donald Trump a big favor here. They just have to agree to hear it and then go slow. And hope that Trump gets elected, in which case all these cases go away. And that seems to me, I don't know what we should expect from this Supreme Court. It's amazing they're going to get the disqualification issue on Thursday and the immunity issue on Monday. I don't know what to expect for them, but certainly if they want to help Trump here, they have lots of ways to do it.
Yeah, and we should also say that this court's posture has been an incredibly imperious and greedy one about what they get to say on what issues of public life they get to say. They have been sort of sticking their noses in all kinds of places. They've been telling executive agencies that they get to say. They've been telling Congress that it delegated things called major questions, even though there's no sort of constitutional doctrine. They've invented it. So they seem to be a court, at least the sort of conservative majority, that is very much a court that's like, we're going to say. And I think that kind of sense of sort of their own kind of grandeur and importance, it's very hard for me to see them. To your point, Lawrence, I think they don't want the mess, but they also want to be we're the ones who say.
And they're the most unpredictable Supreme Court of our lifetimes.
Yes, I mean, particularly on the question of precedent, which is what this entire opinion rests solely on, which is also sort of somewhat worrying. Rachel Maddow, Lawrence O'Donnell, what a pleasure to have you both off the top here.
Let's do this all the time.
You bet. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. Thank you, Chris.
Great.
Thank you.